We're going to be discussing the civil rights movement and how the media affected it in our country. The civil rights movement has been really around for a while, but many people think it started with the Rosa Parks and the bus boycott, when truly the fight for civil rights has always been around, just there was an important factor missing. The factor was the influence of the fast media. Media in the 1960s was booming. More people got informed quicker and knew much more in less time. That's why, during the civil rights movement, the mass media presented civil rights issues to the public about the specific issues being dealt with and why segregation was an issue in our country. The media played a big part in the civil rights movement in the end of segregation and racism. One of the ways the media was such a big part of this change in our country was the media's ability to expose the unfair treatment of colored people to the public in other parts of our country other than the South. Many parts of the southern states in our country were supportive of segregation and did not want equal treatment for African Americans and colored people during this time. One of the ways African Americans and other minorities displayed their desire to be treated equally was with local protests, organized protests in their communities. When protesting in local communities in the South, towns in the southern states, protesters would often be ignored by the local community because of the local public support of segregation. Even after the abolishment of slavery, they still did not want equal treatment for all people. Now the power and importance of the media comes into play. The media helped display the way that colored people and African Americans felt about the segregation in our country and really helped the word get out so that their voices could be heard.
The civil rights movement, which was held in the 1960s, encompassed social movements to end segregation and discrimination against African Americans. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, but that does not mean that all African Americans were treated equally. There were still some who were treated badly, which in that case led to many other movements such as the Montgomery bus boycott. 4 days before the boycott began, on the day of December 1st, 1995, a civil rights activist named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on the Montgomery bus. Due to her not giving up her seat, she was then escorted off the bus by policemen and was arrested and fined for her actions. This became a historical event and was televised throughout the city so others would know about the situation. Rosa Parks had a court hearing which lasted 381 days, and it led to the boycott of public buses and other efforts nationwide to end segregation in public facilities. After hearing and seeing what had happened on television, it is said that local civil rights leaders immediately organized and enrolled the support of Martin Luther King, the de facto leader of the civil rights movement, whose name alone will lead national attention. Martin Luther King helped with the boycott. For that, he was arrested and thrown into jail due to him contributing to the success of the boycott. This act only drew further media attention to the boycott. People started feeling bad for Martin Luther King and for other African Americans in Montgomery as they saw how cruel realities of racism was on television. It is said that after just over a year, the boycott ended when a federal district court declared Montgomery's bus segregation unconstitutional. As you can tell, during this event, the mass media played a huge role because as others heard about this and saw how cruel African Americans were being still treated on television, it led others to start their own movements or protests to end discrimination through the U.S.
The mass media helped expose the dark side of the South that the public had not seen since, which led to the success of the movement. The importance is easily said by Rand Rather, a journalist in this quote, it would have been a long time for the movement to succeed. Television was the instrument. What he means is that without media, the movement would not have acquired the strength needed. The impact of the media also described by the wings as a bird. The way the wings of a bird allow it to fly, giving the bird freedom and some security, the media compared the wings because it allowed people to be safe to some extent and freedom that was not always allowed in the South. The media covered many events during this period of time of the Civil Rights Movement, but the one that caused the most impact was the live streaming of the protesters' march through Salem to Montgomery, which this was streamed on television. The nation saw the treatment of peaceful protesters. During the march, many of the protesters were attacked with brutal force by the police of the city and other white members of the city. In some cases, it was described as black-eyed state troopers in Salem slamming their clubs against the skulls of blacks. This treatment just made the networks on television start to fight for better coverage of civil rights movement, which led to more coverage for the movement. The media had now exposed a world that no one had seen from the South, but also made the public aware that the protesters were protesting for a reason. In many cases, the coverage did provide positive enforcement to the cause, but as it is stated here, dictated segregationalists and committed civil rights proponents both recognize the potential of television news to upset the inertia of segregated society, which means that two sides of the movement use the media as a form of influence to have the public on their side.
In 1963, several civil rights groups created a plan to desegregate Birmingham. At the time, Birmingham was known as a city for its discrimination in employment and social life. Birmingham was also known as one of the most racist cities in the South. The main goal of the plan was to protest non-violently so that the Birmingham civic and business leaders would agree to desegregate. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the main leader that led thousands of African American protesters in Birmingham. During this protest, Dr. Martin Luther King was arrested along with many other African Americans. As the protest continued, Southern Christian Leadership Conference leader James Bevel began to enforce plans for a children's crusade. The mass media played a powerful role in displaying the effects of the children's crusade to the public. The Children's Crusade was an important event of the civil rights movement because there were thousands of children that were trained in the tactics of nonviolence. They accomplished this by creating workshops that pointed out inequalities, taught about protests against injustice, and about nonviolence. The children participating in the movement were determined to accomplish many goals with their protests. For example, one of their goals was to talk to the mayor of Birmingham about segregation in their city. However, things did not go as planned. The children that were participating in the Children's Crusade were arrested on their first day of protest. The mass media presented to the public how these children were sprayed with water hoses, hit with batons, and threatened with police dogs. There was a great amount of footage and photographs of the violent crackdown in Birmingham circulated throughout the nation and the world, causing an outcry. The mass media opened up the eyes of U.S. citizens by showing them how badly African Americans were being mistreated. As a result of the mass media displaying the protests to the public, the Children's Crusade was successful in Birmingham. The mass media played a big part in showing the world how cruel African Americans were being mistreated. As a result, the local officials knew they could no longer ignore the civil rights movement.